The rain that night didn't just fall, it attacked. Seo-jun watched it slash against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, each drop a tiny detonation against glass that cost more than most people earned in a year. Below him, Gangnam glowed like a circuit board, all neon veins and electric arteries pumping life into a city that never admitted exhaustion. His phone vibrated, another threat, another problem requiring his particular brand of solution. Seo-jun didn't bother reading it. He was tired, not the kind of tired sleep could fix. The kind that lived in bones, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the hollow behind his ribs, where something human used to exist before his father's empire swallowed it whole. 28 years old, 3 years running Korea's most sophisticated cybercrime syndicate, 0 arrests, infinite enemies. And absolutely nothing that made him feel alive. The door opened without warning. His head of security, Min-ho, entered with the expression of a man delivering news he knew would be rejected. "The new hire starts tomorrow," Min-ho said. Seo-jun didn't look away from the rain. "I didn't approve a new hire." "You did 3 weeks ago. Digital forensics specialist, West African, top of her field." Now Seo-jun turned. "I hire Koreans." "You hire the best, she's the best." Min-ho placed a tablet on the desk. Chisom Okafor, Nigerian, MIT graduate, worked cybersecurity for the UN, Interpol, 3 Fortune 500 companies. She's cracked systems we couldn't touch. Seo-jun studied the photograph. A woman with eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they saw, expression neutral to the point of aggression. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, she was precise, like a blade or a mathematical proof. "Why would someone with that resume work for me?" Min-ho hesitated. "Her brother, he's sick, needs treatment only available in Seoul, experimental, expensive. So she's desperate. So she's motivated." The distinction mattered. Desperate people broke, motivated people endured. "Put her in the satellite office," Seo-jun said finally. "I don't want her near core operations until we verify loyalty." Min-ho nodded and left. Seo-jun returned to watching the rain, unaware that his entire carefully constructed existence was about to fracture along fault lines he didn't know existed. Chisom arrived at dawn. The building looked legitimate, a tech startup with bright logos and ergonomic furniture. Only 3 people in the company knew what actually happened on the 7th floor, behind servers that hummed with secrets stolen from corporations, governments, individuals who believed their digital lives were private. She'd known exactly what she was walking into. Had weighed her brother's labored breathing against her own moral certainty and made the calculation every desperate person eventually makes. Survival first, conscience later. The office manager showed her to a workstation isolated from the main floor. Not trust then, quarantine. Chisom didn't care. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to save Chukwu. Her older brother, her protector, the one who'd paid for her education by working 3 jobs, who'd celebrated every achievement like it was his own, who'd collapsed 6 months ago with a disease that had no name in Igbo, only in medical journals written by doctors who charged fortunes for hope. Seoul had the treatment, Seoul had the specialists, Seoul had the chance. So Chisom had sold the only thing she had left, her expertise, to the exact kind of person she'd spent her career dismantling. The irony tasted like rust. She booted up her system, fingers moving across keys with the same precision she applied to everything. Within minutes, she'd identified 3 security vulnerabilities in their network architecture, 2 backdoors that shouldn't exist, and 1 terminal that was pinging a location it had no business contacting. Someone was stealing from the thieves. Chisom documented everything, created an encrypted report, and sent it to the anonymous email address she'd been given for priority communications. Then she went back to the assignment she'd actually been hired for, cracking the encryption on a pharmaceutical company's research database. The work was elegant, complex, the kind of puzzle that would have excited her once before she understood what the stolen research would be used for. Now it just felt like drowning in slow motion. Seo Jun read her report twice. Then he stood, grabbed his jacket, and took the private elevator down 7 floors. The satellite office was quiet. Most contractors didn't arrive until noon. But there she was, already deep in code, screens reflecting in eyes that moved too fast to be merely reading. She was hunting. "You found a breach," he said from behind her. Chisom didn't startle, didn't turn, just kept typing. "3 breaches. Your head of security is either incompetent or complicit. Given that he hired me, I'm assuming incompetent." Her accent carried traces of something musical beneath technical precision. British boarding school education layered over Igbo roots, all of it sharpened by years in American tech sectors. "You've been here 4 hours. I've been awake for 36. Now she turned, meeting his gaze with zero deference. "Your pharmaceutical target has quantum-resistant encryption. It'll take me 3 days minimum, possibly 5. Your timeline was unrealistic." Seo Jun studied her. Most people couldn't hold his gaze. Most people instinctively understood that eye contact with a predator was dangerous. Chisom Okafor looked at him like he was a particularly frustrating line of malfunctioning code. "You're very direct. You're paying me for results, not politeness." "I'm paying you for both." Something flickered across her face, not fear, assessment. "Then you're overpaying for one and underpaying for the other." The response was so unexpected that Seo Jun almost smiled. Almost. "Get it done in 3 days. I'll double your rate." He turned to leave. "Why?" Her voice stopped him at the door. "Why what? Why pharmaceutical research? What are you planning to do with it?" The question hung in the air, like a blade, suspended over both their heads. "That's not your concern." "It is if I'm the one stealing it." Seo Jun turned back slowly. "You knew what this job was when you took it." "I knew it was criminal. I didn't know what kind." Her eyes held his, unwavering. "There's a difference between stealing money and stealing medical research that could save lives, if you're planning to ransom it. I'm selling it to competitors. They'll duplicate the research. More companies will have access. More patients will have options." He paused. "Is that morally acceptable enough for you?" Chisom was silent for a long moment. "No," she said finally, "but it's less terrible than the alternatives." "That's all any of us can hope for, less terrible than the alternatives." He left before she could respond. But her words followed him into the elevator, into his car, into the penthouse where rain still attacked windows like it had something to prove. Less terrible than the alternatives. That was the epitaph for his entire existence. 3 days later, Chisom delivered. Not just the pharmaceutical encryption cracked, but a complete vulnerability analysis of their target's entire digital infrastructure. Backdoors, weak points, executive access protocols. It was excessive, thorough to the point of obsession. Seo Jun called her to the penthouse. She arrived at midnight, soaked from rain, laptop bag slung across her body like armor. This was the first time she'd been allowed into core operations, into the space where decisions that destroyed lives were made with the casualness of ordering coffee. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected: expensive, minimal, cold. Like its owner. "You exceeded requirements," Seo Jun said, gesturing to a chair she didn't take. "I do thorough work." "This isn't thorough, this is comprehensive, this is," he paused, searching for the word, "vindictive." Chisom's jaw tightened. "I showed you every weakness. Use it or don't, that's your choice." "Why give me the choice? You could have just delivered what I asked for." "Because maybe you're not as terrible as you could be." The words came out sharp, defensive. "Maybe you'll choose the less terrible option." Understanding dawned slowly, uncomfortably. "You're trying to influence me." I'm trying to survive with something resembling a conscience. Her voice cracked slightly, the first sign of vulnerability he'd seen. Do you know what it's like to be good at something terrible, to have a gift and watch it be used for harm, to betray everything you believe because the alternative is watching someone you love die? The questions hit like physical blows. Because yes, he knew exactly what that was like. Your brother, Seo-jun said quietly, how is he? Chisom's expression shuttered immediately. That's not relevant. It's the only relevant thing. It's why you're here. I'm here because you're paying me. You're here because you're desperate. There's a difference. She flinched, direct hit. Seo-jun moved to the window, giving her space to rebuild whatever defense she needed. The rain had stopped. Seoul glittered below, beautiful and brutal, a city that rewarded ruthlessness and punished hesitation. I was 17, he said suddenly, surprising himself, when my father sat me down and explained what our family actually did. Not tech innovation, not legitimate business, digital crime, sophisticated, organized, generational. Chisom didn't respond, but he felt her attention sharpen. He gave me a choice, walk away with nothing or stay and inherit everything. I chose everything. He turned back to face her. I tell myself I had no choice, that family obligation, cultural pressure, circumstance, all of it forced my hand. But that's a lie. I chose this. Every day I choose this. Why are you telling me this? Because you think you're alone in your compromise. You're not. Something painful and honest passed between them, recognition of shared wounds, different circumstances, identical guilt. I don't want your companionship in hell, Chisom said, but her voice had lost its edge. Neither do I, but here we are anyway. The silence that followed was different from before, not hostile, not comfortable, just real. The treatment, Seo-jun said finally, for your brother, I'll cover it, all of it, separate from your salary. Chisom's eyes widened. Why? Because I can, because it's less terrible than not doing it. I don't want your charity. It's not charity, it's payment, for the comprehensive work, for the moral compass you're trying to force on me, he paused, for showing me that someone still thinks I might choose the less terrible option. Chisom studied him with those cataloging eyes, and Seo-jun had the uncomfortable sensation of being analyzed, reduced to component parts, assessed for functionality and flaw. There are conditions, she said finally. Name them. I want to know what you're doing, all of it. No more satellite office quarantine. If I'm complicit, I'm fully informed. I won't be a weapon aimed blindly. The request was dangerous, exposed her to legal liability, made her a target. Also made her a partner. Agreed. And I veto anything involving children, hospitals, or essential infrastructure. Water, power, emergency services, those are off limits. That limits our options significantly. That's the point. Seo-jun considered this. Every instinct screamed that giving an employee, a new, unproven employee, veto power was insane. Weakness, vulnerability. But something else whispered that maybe weakness was just honesty by another name. Agreed, he said finally. Chisom nodded once, then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not warmly, not happily, but with grim satisfaction of someone who'd just negotiated terms with the devil and somehow extracted a conscience clause. I'll see you Monday, she said, moving toward the door. Chisom. She paused. Thank you. The words felt foreign in his mouth, unpracticed, but undeniably necessary. She looked back, expression softening fractionally. Thank you for my brother's life, even if your money is stained. All money is stained. The question is what we do with it after. Then let's make sure we do something less terrible, she said, and left. Seo-jun stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of power that suddenly felt less like achievement and more like prison bars. Outside, Seoul began to glow with approaching dawn. And for the first time in years, Seo-jun felt something other than the hollow ache of endless, meaningless conquest. He felt accountable. The partnership that followed was strange, tense, and startlingly effective. Chisom moved into core operations. Not physically, she kept her isolated workstation, but informationally. Every operation crossed her desk. Every target got her analysis. Every plan received her moral audit. Seo-jun found himself justifying decisions he'd once made automatically. Why this company? Because they're defrauding investors. Why this amount? Because it's enough to matter, not enough to destroy. Why this method? Because it's traceable back to their own security failures. She pushed, challenged, forced him to articulate logic he'd previously operated on instinct alone. It was exhausting. It was transformative. Operations became more targeted, less collateral damage. They went after the corrupt, the exploitative, the corporations that treated human suffering as acceptable cost of profit maximization. Still criminal, still illegal, but less terrible than the alternatives. Chisom's brother began treatment, experimental immunotherapy that attacked his disease at the genetic level. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which in medical speak meant maybe he won't die. She worked 18-hour days, splitting time between code and hospital visits, returning to the office with exhaustion etched into every movement but determination burning in her eyes. Seo-jun found himself watching her the way he'd once watched security footage, looking for patterns, weaknesses, angles of exploitation. Except now he was looking for something else entirely. Signs of breaking, moments when the weight became too much, opportunities to help without being asked. He started having dinner delivered to her workstation when she forgot to eat. She started flagging potential operations before he requested them. They developed a rhythm, not friendship, not romance, something stranger and more necessary, mutual respect between people who had no business respecting each other. "You're changing," Min-ho observed one evening, voice carefully neutral. "How? You ask questions now, before you just decided. Is that a problem?" "It's different, the crew is uncertain." Seo-jun looked up from his screen. "Uncertain how?" "Uncertain whether you're getting soft, whether the Nigerian woman is a liability or a—" Min-ho paused, searching for the right word. "A conscience." "And what do you think?" Min-ho was silent for a long moment. "I think she makes you remember you're human. I think that's dangerous, but I also think it might be necessary." The assessment hung in the air, brutal and accurate. "Keep the crew in line," Seo-jun said finally. "The operations continue. The methods evolve. Anyone who can't adapt can leave. And if they choose to leave with information." The old threat, the old solution, violence dressed up as security protocol. Seo-jun felt the familiar weight of it, the ease with which he could order someone's disappearance, the efficiency of fear as management tool. Then he thought of Chisom, asking why and how and what will this cost in human terms, and felt something inside him resist. Pay them well, remind them what they'd lose, but no threats. No, he paused, no violence unless absolutely necessary. Min-ho's eyes widened fractionally. "Boss, I know it's weak, it's stupid, it's going to cause problems." Seo-jun met his oldest friend's gaze steadily. "Do it anyway." After Min-ho left, Seo-jun sat in darkness, wondering when exactly Chisom Okafor's moral audits had started including his own soul. The attack came on a Thursday. Not physical, not violent, just information weaponized with surgical precision. Someone leaked their client list to a rival syndicate, 30 names, 30 wealthy criminals who'd paid for digital services they couldn't acquire legitimately, 30 people who suddenly became leverage, blackmail material, targets. The rival organization moved immediately, extorting clients, threatening exposure, demanding territory, tribute submission. Seo Jun's entire operation was hemorrhaging reputation and power by the hour. It came from inside, Minho reported, face grim, someone with deep system access. The implication hung between them, obvious and terrible. Not her, Seo Jun said immediately. How do you know? Because she would have told me she was going to destroy me. She's pathologically honest. Maybe that's the con, honesty as camouflage. Seo Jun pulled up access logs, tracing the leak back through layers of security. The breach had originated from core operations, had used legitimate credentials, had covered its tracks with professional precision. Someone who knew their systems intimately. Someone who'd been with them for years. His eyes landed on a timestamp that made his blood freeze. The leak had occurred during the only 2-hour window when Chisom had been alone in the server room last week, updating firewall protocols. No, he said aloud, rejecting the evidence even as his analytical mind catalogued probability, motive, opportunity. She needed money, her brother needed ongoing treatment. The costs were astronomical. What if the initial payment wasn't enough? What if she'd been offered more by rivals who wanted to dismantle his organization? Bring her in, Minho said. Let me question her. Seo Jun thought of Minho's questioning methods. Efficient, brutal, effective. No, boss. I'll handle it. You're compromised. The accusation was fair, accurate, undeniable. I'll handle it, Seo Jun repeated, voice dropping to the register that ended discussions. He found Chisom in the hospital, sitting beside her brother's bed. Chukwu was sleeping, monitors beeping steadily, IV drips feeding medicine into veins that carried hope molecule by molecule through his system. She looked up when Seo Jun entered, and something in his expression made her stand immediately. What happened? We need to talk, privately. They stepped into the hallway. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in sickly illumination that made every face look like a corpse. Someone leaked our client list, Seo Jun said without preamble. From inside, using credentials that accessed our systems during the window when you were alone in the server room. He watched her face carefully, looking for tells, signs of guilt, the micro-expressions that betrayed deception. Instead, he saw her eyes narrow with analytical focus. Show me the logs. That's your response, show me the logs. I'm a digital forensics specialist, that's always my response. She pulled out her phone, send me everything, I'll find who did it. You're not concerned that you're the primary suspect. Chisom looked at him with an expression hovering between frustration and disappointment. Of course I'm concerned, I'm also innocent, which means someone is setting me up, which means there's evidence, which means I can find it. The logic was sound, the confidence absolute. Also exactly what a skilled manipulator would project. Your brother needs treatment that costs millions, Seo Jun said, hatting himself for the words even as he spoke them. You need money, ongoing money, you have motive. Something changed in Chisom's face, not anger, hurt. You think I'd betray you for money? People betray for less. People betray when they're not seen, when they're treated as tools instead of humans, when they have no reason to maintain loyalty. Her voice was quiet, precise, devastating. You've paid for my brother's treatment. You've included me in decisions. You've treated me like a partner, not a weapon. Why would I destroy the one person who's shown me basic human dignity? The question hit harder than any accusation. Because she was right. In his world, betrayal came from those who were used, discarded, treated as expendable. Chisom was none of those things. But fear made people irrational. Desperation made people break their own rules. Prove it, he said finally. Prove you didn't do it. Chisom nodded once. I will, but Seo Jun, she paused, using his name for the first time without professional distance. After I prove it, we're going to have a conversation about trust, about whether you actually believe in the partnership you claim we have, or whether I'm just a slightly better treated version of every other asset in your world. She turned and walked back into her brother's room, leaving Seo-jun in the hallway, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and the weight of his own doubt. Chisom worked through the night. Seo-jun gave her access to everything, despite Minho's protests, despite his own lingering suspicion, because something in him needed to believe that moral certainty could exist in his world without being performance or con. At 4 a.m., she sent him a message, "Found it, coming to you." She arrived at the penthouse soaked again. Apparently rain was Seoul's default setting, carrying a laptop and expression of grim satisfaction. "It wasn't me," she said, opening files that showed access patterns, IP spoofing, credential theft, so sophisticated it had mimicked her digital fingerprint perfectly. "It was someone who wanted you to think it was me." "Who?" "Your head of security." The words landed like physical blows. "Min-ho." "He's been siphoning funds for 8 months, small amounts, unnoticeable in the chaos of daily operations, but eventually someone audits, eventually someone notices." She pulled up financial records, showing diversions that added up to millions. He needed a distraction, a crisis that would justify chaos, and a scapegoat. Seo-jun stared at the evidence, mind racing through years of friendship, loyalty, shared history, now reframed as potential deception. "This could be fabricated." "It could be, so could the evidence against me. That's the thing about digital forensics. Reality is just data, and data can be manipulated." Chisom met his eyes. "You have to decide what you believe based on something other than evidence. You have to decide who you trust." The choice crystallized before him. Believe Min-ho, his friend of 15 years, his most trusted lieutenant. Or believe Chisom, the woman who'd walked into his world 3 months ago and immediately started demanding he become better than he was. Logic said trust the known. Experience said trust the established relationship. Instinct said trust the person who'd never lied to him, even when honesty was dangerous. "Where is he now?" Seo-jun asked. "Probably running. If he's smart, he's already out of the country." But Min-ho wasn't running. He was in the building, in the server room, wiping drives. Seo-jun found him there, surrounded by blinking lights and humming machines, destroying evidence with the same efficiency he'd once used to protect the organization. "I had the logs analyzed," Seo-jun said from the doorway. Min-ho froze, then slowly turned, hand moving toward the weapon holstered at his side. "Don't," Seo-jun said quietly, his own gun already drawn, not pointed, just present. "She turned you against me." Min-ho's voice carried disbelief. 3 months, and she's destroyed 15 years of friendship. "You destroyed it by stealing, by framing her, by," Seo-jun paused, "by betting I'd choose familiar loyalty over uncertain truth. She's using you, can't you see that? The brother, the morality, all of it is performance. She's playing you. Maybe, or maybe you can't imagine someone actually having principles because you've never had any yourself." The accusation hung between them, brutal and final. Min-ho's hand was fully on his weapon now. "What happens now?" "You leave tonight. I keep the evidence inactive as long as you disappear completely. No contact, no return, no revenge." "You're letting me go." Disbelief colored every word. "I'm choosing the less terrible option. That's what I do now." Min-ho laughed, harsh and bitter. "She's made you soft. It's going to get you killed." "Probably, but at least I'll die as something resembling human." They stood in silence, years of history collapsing between them. Then Min-ho lowered his weapon, nodded once, and walked past Seo-jun toward a future that no longer included shared empire. Seo-jun didn't watch him go, just stood in the server room, surrounded by machines that hummed with secrets, wondering when exactly mercy had become more terrifying than violence. Chisom was waiting in the penthouse when he returned. "He's gone," Seo-jun said, pouring whiskey he didn't want but needed ritual for. "You let him go." "I chose the less terrible option." She smiled then. actually smiled with genuine warmth instead of grim satisfaction. You're learning. I'm becoming weak. You're becoming human. There's a difference. Seo-jun sat heavily, exhaustion from the night, from the months, crashing over him like a wave. He was right, you know, this is going to get me killed. Being human in my world is suicide. Chisom moved to the window, looking out at Seoul as dawn painted it in shades of gold and grey. Maybe, or maybe being human is the only thing that makes survival worth it. Philosophical at 5 a.m. My brother's alive, I'm not in prison, and you just showed mercy to someone who betrayed you. I'm allowed to be philosophical. Seo-jun joined her at the window. The city below was waking, millions of people beginning days they believed were separate from the criminal machinery that hummed beneath the surface. What now? He asked. Now we rebuild, find new security, restore client confidence, continue operations. She glanced at him, with veto power and moral audits. With veto power and moral audits, he agreed. They stood in silence, watching light consume darkness, the way it did every morning, temporary victory in an eternal cycle. Thank you, Chisom said suddenly, for believing me, for trusting me when evidence suggested you shouldn't. Thank you for giving me reason to. We are still criminals. Yes, still doing terrible things. Just less terrible than the alternatives. She laughed, the sound surprising and bright in the heavy silence. That's a terrible motto for a criminal organization. It's the only one I've got. Maury's silence, comfortable now, the silence of two people who'd survived something together and found themselves changed by the experience. My brother's responding to treatment, Chisom said eventually. The doctors are now cautiously optimistic, bordering on actually hopeful. That's good. It means I'll be able to work normal hours soon, maybe even sleep occasionally. Revolutionary concept. Maybe even have dinner, like a human, instead of surviving on whatever gets delivered to my workstation. The suggestion hung in the air, casual but weighted with implication. Are you asking me to dinner? I'm suggesting we should eat food, together, like partners who occasionally acknowledge each other's existence outside of criminal operations. Seo-jun turned to face her fully. That sounds dangerously like friendship. Terrifying, I know. We might have to have conversations about things other than encryption and moral philosophy. I'm not sure I know how to do that. Neither am I, but I'm good at learning new skills. Something warm unfurled in Seo-jun's chest. Not love, too soon, too complicated, too dangerous, but possibility. The chance that his world could include something other than endless calculation and strategic manipulation. Dinner, he said finally, but nothing expensive. No place that requires me to use my reputation as currency. There's a Nigerian restaurant in Itaewon, terrible ambience, incredible food. Owner doesn't care who you are as long as you pay and don't cause trouble. Perfect. Friday. Friday. Chisom nodded, satisfied, and returned her attention to the window. The city was fully awake now, Seoul at its most beautiful, when possibility felt infinite and consequences seemed distant. Seo-jun. Yes. Thank you for choosing the less terrible option. For him, for me, for yourself. He didn't respond with words, just stood beside her, watching dawn consume night, thinking that maybe, being less terrible than the alternatives was enough. Maybe it had to be. Because in a world built on exploitation and control, choosing mercy was its own form of revolution. And revolution had to start somewhere. Even if that somewhere was just a penthouse in Gangnam, occupied by a criminal learning to be human and a woman teaching him how. Less terrible than the alternatives. It wasn't redemption, but it was a beginning. What happens when Chisom discovers Seo-jun's next operation targets the very hospital treating her brother? When choosing the less terrible option becomes impossible, when the partnership built on fragile trust faces its ultimate test.